drone warfare going even deeper in terms of entrenchment. As a defense manufacturer, what challenges does IdeaForge face in the defense ecosystem?
You will realize that electronic warfare has become a reality, and any drone that is not resilient to electronic warfare will not survive any action in the field. In drones, the challenge is that when we started, we wanted to do it for a Jawan. Now, what are the needs of a Jawan? For a Jawan, it is very important that they can observe their target without getting noticed themselves, right? Which means you need to go closer to your target to observe their activity, which means you have to zoom in. We've always built these zoomable payloads. So we built our own payloads to go onto our drones to give intelligence capability to our end customers. So that's again an area that we've worked on.
So, as a drone company, do you speculate learning from the things that are happening around you, such as the war that we're seeing in Russia, Ukraine, or Israel, Gaza? We see a lot of drone warfare coming in place. Do you learn from that and you maybe speculate maybe what the country would need in the future?
The reality that we are learning from these wars is that in an entrenched war, military and industry are essentially one unit, one team. We're going to have drones from as light as under 250 grams to as heavy as 500 kgs.
And is it enough?
Nobody should prevent us from making our own technology, from our own needs, for our own needs, right? So how do you do that?
Welcome back to Diary for Publisher, a space where we decode strategy, technology, and the future of warfare. Today we are talking to the skies, literally. Joining us is Ankit Mehta, the co-founder and CEO of IdeaForge, the company that's powering India's drone revolution, from border surveillance to high-altitude reconnaissance. IdeaForge drones are becoming the eyes of our armed forces. Ankit is not just a tech entrepreneur, he's a pioneer reshaping how India defends its sovereignty through indigenous innovation. In this episode, we dive deep into the evolving role of drones in modern warfare, India's position in the global drone race, the different types of UAVs being developed, and the real-world use case scenarios emerging from current conflicts around the world. We'll also explore the challenges in India defense procurement ecosystem and what it really takes to build battle-ready tech in a complex policy landscape. Let's get into it. The future is unmanned, but it's being led by bold minds like his. Without further ado, let's get started. Before we dive into today's conversation, I want to take a quick moment and ask for a favor. We noticed that 93% of you who watch our content regularly aren't subscribed yet. My promise to you is simple. If you hit that subscribe button, we'll keep working hard to bring thought-provoking conversations, incredible guests, and the topics you really care about the most. It is practically free for you, but it makes a huge difference for us, helping us grow, reach more people, and bring even better content your way. Thank you for supporting. It means the world to us. Now let's get back to the video. Mr. Ankit Mehta, welcome to Diary for Publisher. It's an honor to have a conversation with you.
Thank you, Shivam. It was a pleasure to be here. Very excited to have this chat about.
Amazing. Today's conversation is going to be about drones. But before that, I want to understand your vision and your company's vision of what you do, IdeaForge.
Absolutely, Shivam. So, IdeaForge, when it started, we started with the vision that when we first came across the idea of building drones, it was about 20 years back in 2004, we built our first drone. Since then, as a team, we were fascinated with the idea of the domain of unmanned electric aviation or uncrewed electric aviation. And I think that domain and its potential remains something that is given, that's going to transform the world. And you've seen that many applications have popped up since then, which are using this technology very, very effectively. So when we started off, we were more like having fun with the tech because, in 2004 as college students, it was a fun project. But in 2008, when attacks in Mumbai happened, we saw that naval helicopters are trying to see into the third and fourth floor of the Taj Hotel. We felt like perhaps our drones should have been leveraged instead of those naval helicopters. And maybe we could have helped see what's happening on the blind side of the house and the hotels as well. And therefore, we decided that we'll take all the fun we were having with the technology and convert it into a product for our forces that they can use for these kind of situations. So 2009, we launched India's first quadcopter drone. 2010, we made our first sale to a police force in the country. And since then, we've essentially spent our time trying to operationalize this technology with our forces. Our customers have done over 600,000 missions on our drones. Almost every 3 minutes, an IdeaForge drone takes off in the service of a surveillance or geospatial mission.
I was just going through your website, and one of your drones, which are the new ones, it said that it's 5 times ahead. What do you mean by the 5 times?
So we recently launched a product, or the next iteration of our Netra series of products. Netra series of products is the original quadcopter series in the country that has basically been deployed with pretty much all of our forces. The Netra drones and the leap that we've done in the fifth generation is taking a lot of learnings that we got from the wars that we're observing across the world and the way drones are deployed in this domain. You will realize that electronic warfare has become a reality, and any drone that is not resilient to electronic warfare will not survive any action in the field. We are also observing that it's visible. Some of these effects are visible on our own borders. On the other hand, the other very clear reality is that tactics is getting copied left, right, and center. Every 21 days, a new tactic is getting copied, and people have a counter to that tactic. So, tactics is not good enough to win a war because these are deep entrenched wars that have been going on for a long time. And therefore, you need a system that can give you advantage in terms of performance, because performance is harder to match because it is embedded many a times in the efficiency with which the platform is built and how the hardware is. On top of that, you need the ability to upgrade your tactics in field. You need to be able to upgrade your intelligence in the field, so that if you have an autonomous system, it can respond to the environment and the changing environment better. So again, upgradability in field or having onboard compute where intelligence can be updated is something which will become very important going forward, which is again a capability we've embedded in that platform. The other thing is that you will realize that essentially it's going to be perplexing for the forces to have a system, a specific system for a specific job. While they are the most efficient systems in many cases, the challenge is that the heterogeneity of what you may need to carry in the field may become unmanageable. And the training debt that we will encounter while doing that will again be a big challenge to grapple with. Creating a multi role platform that can host multiple payloads onto the same platform, including precision payload delivery if required. So it acts as a ISR platform in its daily job, in its daily routine with a primary payload. And on the secondary payload bay, you can mount multiple types of other sensors, or if you want to deliver a specific payload in a specific way, you can do that as well. So on Netra 5, up to 2 kgs of additional payload can be carried. We are building a fog penetrating SAR payload for that. We are building LiDAR payloads. We are building payloads that can mount hyperspectral imaging. So all sorts of imaging capability along with drop capability is something that we can host on that platform. So if you think about the fact that we are building resilience around GNSS denied environment, we are building resilience around communication disruptions, we're building modularity in the platform, we're building very high performance, and we are building field upgradability of intelligence. So this entire chain of things that can make it the next generation system is what we have launched in Netra 5.
Got it. So if you were to briefly tell me all the use cases of a drone, be it commercial, be it military, and what are the ones that IdeaForge is focusing on, just briefly so that the audience has an idea.
What will be important is to understand various categories of drone first. So you have drones that you can launch from the palm of your hand under 250 grams and try and observe an asset or a target which is, let's say, for example, across the street from you. Or you have to observe the same target from maybe 5 to 10 kilometers away. Or the same target needs to be observed from maybe 50 to 100 kilometers away. So depending on where you want to observe the target from, a different category of drone is required. So when you have these different categories of drones, each one of them is suitable for a specific echelon in the armed forces in that one sense. But if you move away from the armed forces as well, certain categories are more suitable for civil uses as well. For example, with drones, you can do 4 broad types of missions. You can do surveillance, you can do mapping, GIS mapping, or general mapping. You can do inspections where you're doing deep asset inspections or vertical assets and other types of assets. And then you can do delivery. Now, delivery can be delivery of a lethal payload or delivery of cargo and delivery
Got
in
it.
many phases. So there are categories of drones and then there are these use cases. Now, on a civil environment, for small payloads or for mapping and inspection applications, maybe the small drones that somebody can carry in a backpack or something like that are more suitable. In general, you will not find that people are deploying a very large asset for doing mapping like that, unless and until you want to cover a very, very large area. Not every use case is requiring that large. So you need different categories of systems, and you need different use cases. Each use case may have a different payload. It may have different requirements in terms of, for example, Netra 5 also hosts obstacle sensing. So if you're going to operate near a lot of obstacles, you're operating closer to Earth, then you may need such kind of sensors. If you're operating pretty much above most obstacles in the vicinity and your mission is slightly different, you may not need obstacle sensing on your platform. So, depending on the nature of the mission, features, different categories become more suitable.
When it comes to military use, one important factor is the indigenization of that drone. And I've been talking to a lot of drone companies, and they claim to be the product to be indigenized. What do you want to put some light on it? When is a drone indigenous in nature, and when it's not?
See, I think indigenization. So, I want to break this down into three aspects, right? The first aspect is the intelligence secure? Is the intelligence coming from a source that we can trust to not have embedded sabotage within it, right? That is first part of what I'll talk about. The second part of what I'll talk about is strategic autonomy. And the third part is indigenization, which is to do with, I would say, broadly economics of the entire platform.
Yeah.
Right. So let's go to the critical subsystems first, the intelligent subsystems first. And if you look at the intelligent subsystems, then the first thing you want to ensure in the hardware part is that it should not be emanating from a geography of concern.
Got it.
And if you look at what we do at IdeaForge, then we started building, let's say, for example, the autopilot, which is the brains of a drone, way back in 2007 itself. Whereas the first open source autopilot came in 2009, I think. And 2011 is when the second one came about, right? So essentially, we've had to build the technology from grassroots and grounds up from the very beginning. Then, if you look at communication, India had a very unique problem that we had a very cluttered RF spectrum in the country. To make something work in our RF spectrum reliably was a very tough problem. So, off the shelf solutions would not work. So, we had to come up with our own way of doing communication so that we could solve this problem of operating in this cluttered RF environment as well as be able to do long range missions for our end users. So we had to build our own communication stack. Then we built our own payloads from day one, because in drones, the challenge is that when we started, we wanted to do it for a Jawan. Now, what are the needs of a Jawan? For a Jawan, it is very important that they can observe their target without getting noticed themselves, right? Which means you need to go closer to your target to observe their activity, which means you have to zoom in. So zooming was not something which was very common in those in early days. In fact, drones itself were uncommon, but zooming was even less common. So we've always built these zoomable payloads. So we built our own payloads to go onto our drones to give intelligence capability to our end customers. So that's again an area that we've worked on. We are very focused on performance because, like I said, tactics will get copied, but raw performance will be hard to beat. And that's why we've always focused on building very high capability on the platform. So that again became a very important vector for us to drive. And that's how we have ensured that most of the critical subsystems in the domain are either designed by us, or for sure, knowing that we are giving it to our forces from day one, we were very clear that we don't want anything from our adversary going on our borders. Because in the end, you're using their intelligent asset, which is something that they can tamper with, and you won't be able to detect easily. So therefore, you at least ensure that the source is clean. So that's something that we've done for many years now. So that's a critical subsystem part. The second part is strategic autonomy. Nobody should prevent us from making our own technology, our own needs, for our own needs, right? So how do you do that? Again, if you are very deeply vertically integrated, and if you have control over the full stack, typically you can get away by disruptions because you can easily find substitutes, because you can re-engineer things very quickly. You know how to do that. You've done that in the past. That is one way of strategic autonomy that's worked quite well for us, because during the pandemic, the disruption that happened did disrupt our supply chain, but we were able to recover from it very quickly because we were able to leverage what's available very fast and morph it because of our control over the stack. Similarly, you need to ensure that most of the critical subsystems, now that definition can expand beyond just the critical intelligence subsystems. It can go to motors, propellers, it can go to the aerostructure. So many different segments can go towards strategic autonomy as well. So again, as you go deeper in technology, as you get deeper control, you get more control over the ability to build it from more basic
Scratch,
building
yeah.
blocks that are difficult for people to prevent us from acquiring, right?
That mean also not hamper your supply chain
Exactly.
when it comes to a conflict
Exactly. Even if there is
situation.
an embargo tomorrow, you will just quickly find a substitute or a different location, or you'll probably not even need to go anywhere because you're already doing it in India. And then comes indigenization, which is primarily about saving dollars. So if I say I'm 70% indigenous, I'm essentially saving that 70% of the value of the technology that is being sold is Indian creation of value. It
But
is
there's no
not.
particular structure to it at the moment, is it?
There is this is the established definition in DAP as well, that you have to have, let's say for example in IDDM or other programs, in some of the programs you have to have 60% indigenous content. When they say indigenous content, the method to evaluate indigenous content is based on the value of the asset, value of the technology, and where are the dollars going, right? And like I said, if you have good control over critical subsystems, you have good level of strategic autonomy on your system, then indigenization is merely dollar counting, right? It is nothing more than that, which is the right way of looking at this entire stack. You, in isolation, look at indigenization, and if everything low value is indigenized, it doesn't help you because you can get hurt on security. And that is more challenging. So the focus has to be on ensuring that critical subsystems are not emanating from wrong locations. Software, even if it is built, it's built on either open source technology that is visible to everybody in terms of inspection or whatever, or it is built on proprietary homegrown software stacks.
Okay.
So there are many of these areas that you can deeply focus on and drive real value out of. So that's how you have to look at it. You can't, in general, talk about indigenous alone because that number may go to just dollars, which may not really help.
What's the claim that IdeaForge has in terms of their drone that's used by the military?
See, we very comfortably meet the requirements of being more than 60% indigenous. In most cases, we are 70 to 80% indigenous. Most of the even non-critical subsystems, which are not intelligent in nature, we are getting them built in India, or we are building them ourselves.
I just want to switch our conversation more in terms of the ecosystem in defense and the intelligence sharing in terms of the R&D. Is there a public-private partnership at the moment in terms of the defense industry? And is it enough?
So the way traditionally defense industry used to work is that the R&D used to be done in DRDOs, and DRDO could do a transfer of technology to the industry, and industry could be productionizing the developed technology for full scale, right? However, I think now with the private industry getting into this domain, the R&D dependence is no longer merely on government dollars, right? R&D is happening in the private sector, like for example what we are doing or some other entities would be doing. We're doing our own development, we are investing our own dollars, and we are building products that our defense forces can use by virtue of our experience with our defense forces, or perhaps in the very beginning by virtue of our imagination. We wanted to build something that we believe is be useful for the end customer. So yes, development from the traditional vector has moved in this direction.
Do they provide you any particular requirements that they have in terms of drones before you start producing yourself, or is it a risk that you take?
In most cases, it is geared towards a specific vacuum that we have observed. It may be a stated requirement. In some cases, it may be an unstated need. I'll give you an example of that. Right, when we built our Switch UAV, the reason why Switch was built was because at that time, to get this kind of flight time or performance on a drone platform was not possible on a conventional quadcopter technology. And regular fixed wings or conventional hand launch UAVs, it was easy to get the flight time, but it was very difficult to operate them in the kind of environment our forces need to operate them, which is hilly areas, etc. Right? So when they wanted large number of those kind of systems, and they articulated that they perhaps want a hand launch system, we developed Switch as a vertical takeoff and landing asset, quite contrary to what was expected by the end user. And today for ISR, I don't think the user looks at buying any small drone that does not operate from a runway to be hand launched. They want it to be vertically takeoff and landing because that really frees them up in terms of where they can deploy the technology from. So I think that's the way we develop technology, where even if there is an unstated need. For example, it is very clear to us that it's not a stated need that we need to build for GNSS denied. There is no RFI right now that I am trying to track where GNSS denied is a very clear demand. But we are very clear from what's happening in the world that GNSS denial is a reality. So we have to build for GNSS denial.
Got it.
So those are the kind of things you do for both stated and unstated needs.
So as a drone company, do you speculate, learning from the things that are happening around you, such as the war that we're seeing in Russia, Ukraine, or Israel, Gaza? We see a lot of drone warfare coming in place. Do you learn from that and maybe speculate maybe what the country would need in the future?
Absolutely. I think it's very critical to learn from that. It's also very important to understand that everything that is happening in the war may not be equally portable to Indian context. For example, right now in the Russia-Ukraine war, a large number of FPV drones are used, first-person view drones are used. Now, in our opinion, it is something that had to be done in that instant at that moment because that was the most effective way of dealing with the situation there. But imagine if all forces in the world were to go back to the basics of training somebody to do hobby flying, which is what FPV drone piloting is.
Yeah.
The training debt we will have on our hands is going to be massive. We don't have a small army, we have millions of soldiers. And those soldiers have to be trained on a technology that goes back to the basics, which is more tuned towards human instinct. So the training debt we will create is going to be very difficult. Plus, the attritional or attributable nature of the asset and the efficacy of the solution is another vector which is not very easy to deal with, because one part is that it's not effective, so it needs to have better technology for it to become more effective, which will naturally make it a bit more advanced than a regular FPV drone. On the other hand, you also have the challenge of logistics. Now, to target one adversary, you need 10 drones and 10 munitions, and you have to, then you'll be able to neutralize the asset. While the cost arbitrage may be fine today, but the logistics of doing all of this and continuously doing all of this to neutralize an adversary is something that may have to be thought about when an alternative solution could potentially be there, which is essentially more intelligent than a regular FPV, which can be more autonomous, at the same time have the ability to have intelligence on board, can be EW resilient. So we have to think of what is the right asset to deploy that can reduce the cost of war.
Got it.
For us, right? So it may not be that you are always learning from what's happening there. You're learning that yes, you need to have EW resilience, but you're also unlearning that everything happening may not directly translate.
True.
Otherwise, you might end up going down a path which may be very difficult. Imagine fighting the war of numbers against our adversary, right? Can we win the battle in the short term in terms of just sheer deployment of numbers? It's very tough, right? Because the production base there, like they're used to building about a lot of
Cheap
this
drones as
technology.
well. The drones
Exactly.
where you see outside, especially Iran, and
So how do you match that volume number, right? It's going to be hard. So we can't ape what's happening elsewhere. We have to learn, we have to distill it, and we have to present a view that we believe is still relevant and going to be effective in front of what we are going to face. So I think that's the way we learn about we learn, and a lot of that distillation has happened. And what you're seeing in what we've launched with Netra 5 is essentially that distillation of those learnings, and we continue to evolve based on what's happening out there.
got it. As a defense manufacturer, what challenges does IdeaForge face in the defense ecosystem?
I think the challenges that all of us face in this defense ecosystem is the main gap of not having adequate fusion of the military industrial complex. Right? And when I say that, what I mean is that the reality that we are learning from these wars is that in an entrenched war, military and industry are essentially one unit, one team fighting the war, right? But the way our systems work is that they don't have any element of continuity of operations for the industrial complex while it is not in that scenario. So if there is no continuity, then there are no habits being built. Just like you need to have a soldier always firing so that they retain how to fire and it becomes a part of your instinct. Similarly, industry needs to continuously run so that it can make sure that it has a workforce that is trained to build it efficiently and to deliver numbers when we really want it. So I think that is something that needs more attention, because it's going to be very important for us when we look at any disruption in the future. This military industrial complex, and the fact that most weapons are now not buy and forget. They are buy and they will need upgrades, because tactics are evolving, people are becoming smarter on the other side because of your use of an asset. So all of that is not going to happen unless there are right habits and the right structures built that natively support that scenario.
I'll close this conversation by understanding your vision of IdeaForge. I started with it, but I want to ask you again, where do you think IdeaForge would go in the next few years, especially when we see drone warfare going even deeper in terms of entrenchment?
See, I think from our point of view, it's very clear that IdeaForge has always focused on electric uncrewed aviation for dual use. So we are building technology that can be used both in civil and defense sectors. We have built a pretty formidable portfolio, in my opinion, in terms of what we are going to have as assets in the near future. We're going to have drones from as light as under 250 grams to as heavy as 500 kgs, spanning from doing surveillance missions to mapping, inspections, ultimately to delivery in logistics as well. So we want to be able to man that entire spectrum and to drive that and lead that by example of creating some of the best performing assets in that class. Because like I earlier said, we believe that performance is going to be crucial. That's what we focus on. Reliability is also important, and therefore focusing on fewer assets but building them reliably is going to be very crucial, because that's what's going to be needed in the times of difficulty and challenge. And last but not the least, autonomy. It's very critical for the future, because when the war breaks out, you want to make sure that the systems can take care of themselves, and the systems are a huge shot in the arm rather than become a liability.
True.
And autonomy is very crucial to that mission.
One point I missed asking you was about the autonomous UAVs now, that unmanned vehicles. Do you think IdeaForge will venture into it as well?
Are you talking about the urban air mobility piece, or you're talking about swarming and other technology capabilities in autonomy?
I'm talking about the future of UAVs, which could be autonomous as well
Absolutely. I think
and intelligent.
so. Some of our drones, in fact, most of our drones that do ISR, they come with very high level of autonomy. So nobody needs to fly them. The operator is essentially telling the drone where does it need to go. The drone has the ability to navigate itself, make sure that if it detects people on ground, it will throw up an alert for the pilot. They will detect motion, throw up an alert. The pilot can tag what they want to track, and the system will track them autonomously. So a lot of autonomy is already built in. What is going to happen is that there are going to be two levels of autonomy going forward. One is there will be collaborative autonomy, where all of this is happening while systems are collaborating with each other and making sure that they can pass on information that is critical for them to do a mission. And there is going to be operating autonomy as well, where the ground operations, the physical operations themselves may become autonomous. So there's going to be a lot of multi-sensor fusion, there's going to be collaborative autonomy, and there's going to be operational autonomy. All of that is going to be driven forward as we move along.
Beautiful. Ankit, this has been a very insightful conversation for me. I'm sure it's been for the audience as well. Before I go, I ask my guests two personal questions, if you allow me.
Yes, absolutely.
This podcast is called Diary of a Publisher, and I make sure to bring in a book in terms of a perspective. If there was a book that you wish you would have read earlier in life that put you in the position that you are in right now, what book would that be?
One of the most inspiring books is one of the thinnest books that I've ever read. It's a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It's a very thin book. It's very inspiring. I think that was a book that I really loved reading. I read it a little bit later. But that is one. And I think there is a very interesting experience I had instead of a book that I'd probably share, is that a lot of times, somebody had come up in an event and said that, what is wrong if you get something without making effort. I think, it was very difficult to digest that getting something without making effort, how does it feel, right? In general, it doesn't feel that exciting. But the funny bit was that when you think about it, I think what matters more is that what you do with what you get, rather than, how you got it. Because there'll be many circumstances in your life where the privileges you receive may not be earned, but how much you can build on top of that is going to be very critical. And
Very true.
I think learning from that for me has been that how do we surround ourselves with more experienced learning, and make sure that that learning is something we can build upon rather than rediscovering everything from ground up. So maybe if I'd known that earlier, it would have been even better.
Very true. That's a beautiful point. My last question for today for you is, if there was an advice you would give to your younger self, your 18-year-old self who's watching, who is at probably just joining IIT and maybe aspires to be in your position, if you could give them any advice.
I think, I'm not sure if I would fix anything, but insofar as the journey is concerned, but I would definitely, reiterate the importance of doing something differentiated and sticking with it for a very long time. I think real merit in compounding. It may look slow, it may look tedious, it may look sometimes that it's going backwards,
Yeah.
but it adds up.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That's a good ending point to our conversation. It's been lovely interacting with you. Thank you so much for your time. And
Thanks, Shivam.
all the best to IdeaForge for its future endeavors.
Thank you so much, Shivam. Real pleasure.
We at DOAP are working really hard to take this podcast to the next level. Our guests are going to get even better. Our production quality is going to get even better. And hopefully, I'm going to get even better too. Most importantly, we are committed to being consistent and continue to do what we love the most. Until then, keep reimagining yourself and know that the power of change lies within you. Jai Hind.